Hello and welcome to week 4 of this video tutorial series in season 4 of the iRacing Global Mazda MX-5 Cup series for virtualracingschool.com. So for the first of 2 visits this season we head to Mazda Raceway aka Laguna Seca, another of the original North American circuits on the iRacing service, and has worldwide fame, most notably for its infamous plunging chicane known as the corkscrew. Elevation change defines the circuit with a total of 55 meters between the lowest and highest points, and many corners either fall away or heavily camber up on exits, meaning a unique approach to each one. It's not the longest circuit in total length, but lacks long straights and packs in many corners, and thus the driver typically has very little time to rest during each lap. So I'm continuing to right foot brake this week, which was a struggle around here and took me a bit of time to really get to grips with, because you really need control, precise control with how you release the brake pedal. However, the lap eventually was pretty good, and as usual I've driven with the iRacing supplied baseline setup in default weather to match this season series. So as ever, I'll play the lap through for you first before going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 1 minute 39.229, and what we'll do is we'll go to the end of my outlap, where it's obviously important as usual to get a really nice exit out of here, especially because you have quite a long run past the start-finish straight down towards turn 1. Well, turn 1 in fact is the left-hand kink at the top of the hill, so this is actually turn 1 here. So it's important, it's not really a corner, but it's important to keep your car nice and tight over to the left as you go through here, and then as you go down the hill you let the car run out towards the outside of the circuit, paying attention to these white lines which will be your braking reference. Now this number 3 line is basically where I tend to brake. Another thing that's worth noting is I was actually on the rev limiter there slightly. If we just play that through actually. So very briefly did I hit the rev limiter there. And in the race you'll probably hit the rev limiter a bit earlier, so it might be worth shifting up into 5th. But on a qualifying lap I think it's a waste of time to shift up into 5th. and it just increases your chance of getting things wrong, especially if you're heel and toe downshifting. Obviously to rev match, obviously you've got more things that can go wrong. So yeah, notice how as I apply the brakes, I am fully over to the right hand side of the circuit with half my car over the white line, and fairly hard on the brakes. So I'm actually off the throttle at the 3, but I'm not on the brakes until just after, because obviously it takes me a bit of time to get my feet to cross. And then we'll basically just keep the car fairly wide initially, and then there's 2 apexes basically. This is now turn 2. So it's really important to try and hook up with both of these if possible, but especially the second apex. So we've got this first one nicely, and notice how I'm holding the brake pedal here, so I'm not letting go, and that's because I don't want the car to just understeer wide and risk me missing this second apex. Now the second apex, you want to have picked up the throttle before you actually reach this point, so halfway in between where the car is at its widest point. So we've ran the car out wide, and then we're going to cut back in again, but before we do that, we pick up the throttle. So we pick up the throttle quite aggressively, not to 100% but 80%, and then depending on how well you've managed to tighten up your exit, if you get a really nice line through here and you've picked up on this curve on the left hand side, you can get to full throttle, and then upshift into third, using all of the track on the exit, depending obviously on how well you've taken. It is going to depend on how wide you're going to be, but this is about as wide as you can afford to be before losing traction. So as you approach turn 4, so this is actually turn 3, sorry. As you approach turn 3, you want to bring the car fully over to the left and just run along this curb on the left. Now this is really wide actually for me, so I might actually be just, yeah, so I'm pretty much flirting with disaster there. I wouldn't recommend entering quite so wide, because there is a risk that you can drop a wheel onto the gravel, but pretty much just after the 2 marker, you want to start thinking about turning in. Now it's very easy to brake too late into this one, I find, but really the best approach is to brake fairly early and try and carry the speed through and the momentum through. So I'm already on the brakes, and I'm not braking very hard, and that's quite important. So I'm fairly early on the brakes, but I'm not braking very hard, and that way I can roll the speed through. So I'm also left foot braking because I don't need to downshift into this corner, so I'm also able to play with the throttle slightly on entry, just to get the front end to where I need it to be. Now in terms of your line at the apex, you can afford to get really close to this red curb, which is taller, but don't go fully over it because it will pick up the front end and bounce you wide. So if you do it right, you can afford to pick up the throttle quite early on the exit and carry the speed through, which is the most important thing. So obviously letting the car run out wide again on the exit, just bring it back onto the grey stuff, and then over to the left even further for the widest possible entry through turn 4. Now turn 4 is a 4th gear corner, with the very slightest hint of a brake. Nope, not this time. Sometimes I'll be brushing on the brake, but obviously on this lap it was just about right for me to just get through here with a lift. So I'm up into 4th now. I've turned in quite hard as the curb on the left has ended, and I'm having a few lifts of the throttle. So I'm fully off the throttle now, and then I kind of take 2 attempts to pick up the throttle fully on the exit. Now basically what you want to do is make the radius through this corner as wide as possible, so that you can carry as much speed through here as you can, because the exit down to turn 5 is quite important. It's a fairly long straight. So the other thing that's worth saying is it's surprising how tight a line you can take through here. So I'm just brushing over this red curb on the inside, but the reality is you can actually afford to use this red curb entirely. It's one of the few corners at Laguna where you can get away with this. But this was still a pretty good sector for me. And the car was able to just keep within the exit curb on the left. It's okay to just let some wheels run into the gravel here, or sand, or whatever you want to call it, dust. But just be aware that if you do that, you tend to lose just a bit of exit momentum. So if you can keep it within the circuit there, it's definitely better. And then you're bringing the car up in fourth gear. You're bringing the car still in fourth gear. Sorry, you're not upshifting into fifth before turn 5, leaving it in fourth. But you want to run along this curb basically for the shortest distance possible to turn 5. So I'm just basically riding the entire length of the curb, looking at my braking markers for turn 5. Now it's going to be pretty much in between 3 and 2, so there's a white line as well. Now typically I'm not looking at these markers at the time when I apply the brake. I look at them before I brake, and then at the point when I'm actually braking, I'm already looking in to the apex, which is a good habit to get into. But I'm pretty much braking just after that white line, and it's quite an early turn in to turn 5, because there's some camber on the exit which can pull you round. So yeah, you want a fairly early turn in, and it's important to get the car to rotate nicely. So you want to trail brake quite heavily through here. So I've got good rotation there, in fact a little bit of oversteer. Now the most important thing is that you arrest the oversteer as quickly as you can. So I was very quick with my steering there. Watch. And that's because I really didn't want the oversteer to be sustained through the exit, because any exit oversteer typically will hurt your momentum. So generally it's okay to have a little bit of oversteer on entry, but you want to avoid it if possible on exit, because it will hurt your momentum. But this was quite nice, hooked up really nicely to that inside curb, which is ideal, and then full throttle from this point outwards, and the camber is just keeping the car turning for me. So again, using all of the width of the track as we head up to turn 6, one of the most difficult corners on the entire circuit, because the apex is completely blind, basically up until the point where you have to turn in. So if we just have a look at that, and there is a slight hint of the brake for me that time. So again, I'm left foot braking here, and that allows me to just play with the throttle as I'm braking. And notice how our turning point is fully over to the right hand side, almost in the dirt here, but we basically want to be turning in either as soon as we pass the 2 marker, or as soon as this red curb on the apex comes into view. So it's just come into view there for me, so I'm turning in now, just playing with the brake pedal, just breathing on the brake pedal, and this was absolutely spot on for me this time, because I'm right up close to this red curb. But notice how I don't actually make contact with it. That's absolutely critical. This is one of the red curbs which will definitely throw you off if you do hit it, and it can do horrible things to the suspension as well. So it's definitely better to turn in too late than it is too early into this one. But this was just right, timed it just right. It's all about timing, and I was able to pick up the throttle really early and really hard, and not have to lift off, and that's the most important thing. So I actually pick up the throttle just before I apex, so about as early as you can afford to do it there, and fortunately the car just about had enough grip to stay within the confines of the circuit. The other thing why it's so important to get your timing right here is at the apex there's a lot of camber, So if you miss that camber, it basically doubles your difficulty in terms of getting through and staying within the exit confines. It's very, very easy to drop two wheels on the gravel here, and even if you do manage to keep the car under control, typically that will result in a loss of momentum, and it's very difficult to get the car to stay back on the circuit once you've done that. It tends to stay out there for a while because the car's still quite loaded up at that point. So up towards the climb to the corkscrew now, keeping the car over to the left, just watching for this curb, just running along this curb on the left hand side to give ourselves the widest approach to the braking zone for the corkscrew. Now the braking zone is pretty much just as the circuit crests, or just before the circuit crests. So you've got this curb on the right hand side. You want to be braking pretty much as that curb starts, or just before, in fact, if we have a look, because obviously I'm having to right foot brake now, so just before the curb I'm on the brakes, just before the 3 as well. And it's a fairly hard braking zone, but not too aggressive really, because now I was also a little bit too early on the brakes there, so I'll just get into that shortly. But first I'll explain that because the circuit crests here, the car goes really light, so you can't afford to brake too hard, otherwise you'll get out of shape, or you'll be too heavily reliant on the ABS. So I'm braking just below 50% here. Now the reason that I say I brake too early is because I take a couple of attempts at turning in. So we'll just see that here. So if I slow this down, I go to turn in there, but it's too early. It's too early, and that's because I've slowed the car down just a bit too soon for that kind of turn-in point. So I straighten the wheel and have another attempt here, which is pretty much optimally timed at this point. And notice that I'm only just bleeding off the brake pedal as I approach this first apex. So now I'm just apexing the first curb, and this is pretty much the ideal line. So you want basically the whole car over this inside curb to give yourself the shallowest line through the corkscrew, and you want to pick up the throttle assuming that you've got the car pointed pretty much at this. So there's a group of trees here, there's 3 of them, so the right hand tree is basically where you need to be aiming. If you're aiming just wide of this, then you're going to have to lift out just a little bit longer, but this is pretty much ideal for me. So we'll just run this through, and then obviously you can't see the apex down here until you've arrived at it, so it's pretty much just about timing your entry over here at the top, because obviously once you're here you can't really do anything. If you're too wide, then that's it, you can't really do much. So it's all about timing the first part of the corkscrew to get your line right for the exit, where I'm now fully committed to the throttle, upshifting into third, just a slight correction for oversteer there. It's also wise to anticipate a bit of oversteer there as the circuit falls away from you. And then to turn 9, bringing the car over to the right hand side, but not fully over to the right hand side, upshifting into fourth. And the reason that you don't want to be completely over near this curb is because the circuit's more cambered on the inside than it is on the outside, so you can find yourself unable to make it back to this fairly late apex through turn 9 if you just leave the car too wide on entry. So you want to start turning in fairly soon and just kind of breathe out of the throttle. You might want to play with the brake pedal. I don't know if I do on this lap. No, I don't. Sometimes I do. It just depends on how wide you're running. So obviously on this particular lap I've been able to keep the car nice and tight, so I don't have to trail brake at all to bring the car in. So I'm off the throttle at this point, and then you want to kind of just pick up the throttle as you apex, Now this is a really nice line for me here. It's very easy to miss this apex and just try and carry a bit too much speed through, which will run you wide, and then it will cost you time through the exit because you have to hesitate so much on the throttle at this point right here. So that was quite nice. I'm able to be fully committed to the throttle at this point, and I'm desperately trying to bring the car over at this point to the left hand side of the circuit for my approach into turn 10. Now the approach to turn 10 ideally needs to again be fully over to the left on the left hand side curb, and the circuit drops away quite heavily here, so as you enter this corner you tend to get quite a lot of oversteer, and it's really important to have the oversteer under control as you exit. So I'm just on the brakes here as the curb starts, and then a bit of oversteer there, but it's okay, and the car's nicely balanced at the apex, which is exactly what I want. So as I'm just braking here, just teasing the brake pedal, it's not a heavy braking zone at all, it's only about 25%, 20%, because you want to carry as much speed through as you can, and to not brake too late once again. So it's all about momentum. So brake early, not very much, and carry the speed through. So as the circuit falls away and then cambers up, as the circuit cambers up on the exit, or the apex, sorry, I'm able to get to full throttle. And then unfortunately it kind of flattens out at the exit, so you lose a bit of grip on the exit. So yeah, pretty much just you're going to have to practice this. It's a very difficult circuit, but it's quite rewarding when you do get it right. So this is quite nice. I picked up the throttle nice and early, and just keeping it within the confines of the circuit on the exit there. So back on the flat level part of the circuit and heading to the final corner, which is turn 11, where I've definitely thrown away good laps before. Braking at the 2 marker. Obviously you're fully over to the right once again, but yeah, braking at the 2 marker, fairly heavy braking zone, about a 50% brake pressure there from me. And it's the most important thing is to not be wide at this apex, this final apex, because it will ruin your exit. So I'm keeping the car straight at this point, quite a late turn in, but continuing to just kind of hold the brake pedal into the apex, and making sure I get a nice tight apex. So my line through here is nice and tight. You can afford to be even tighter than that. You can afford to run over this red curb, and then you obviously want to be straightening the car as quickly as you can, so you can get onto full throttle as quickly as you can. And you will get a 1x if you venture off into this AstroTurf too much, and you also lose traction because there's less grip out there as well. But this was quite a nice exit from me. And then obviously you want to keep the car nice and straight as you cross the start-finish line. So that completes our analysis with the MX-5 Global Cup car at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. You can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-to-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Commander SimSport. Good luck this week, and thanks for watching.